What do you do when there's too much love in your workplace? Stay tuned. Welcome to Workplace Wake Up, your go-to podcast for practical employment law guidance. I'm Jennifer Shaw, the founder of Shaw Law Group, and I'm here to help HR professionals and leaders navigate the legal minefields of the modern workplace. Each week, we tackle real-world issues with clear advice and a little tough love. Let's get started. I'm so excited to talk about our subject today. I want to talk about the crossover between personal lives and work lives. I did a training for a client on this topic recently, and it was really interesting because I think some people think they can have this really clear line between work and home. And it was a lot easier when we didn't have cell phones and everybody being able to be in contact with you 24/7. I mean, I remember when I was first a lawyer, we still took messages on those little yellow pads. So when I was on an airplane, nobody was calling me or texting me or emailing me. It was a beautiful thing. I watched the movies. It was so great. And now I'll be on a plane and I'll tell a client, I'm traveling this morning, and their response is, great, because I need you to review a separation agreement. So glad you're on the plane. You'll have time to deal with my issue, right? So this whole line between work and our personal lives is a very blurry line. I don't even think it's a line. I think it's like some fog, okay? Because you really can't even say it's a line. So for example, let's say you hire someone you're dating, or you hire a relative, or you have a social media post. Let's say you're a blog writer and you post all kinds of stuff about social media, but you have a job where some of your views, it may not be appropriate what you're saying in your blog post, even though you're doing it on your own time, in the middle of the night, in your PJs, it still could reflect on you at work. So what do? Okay. So what I want you to think about is, let's take a scenario. Let's say we've got two managers, work together for a long time. They work together very closely every day, multiple times a day, all day long. They're working together and they start a relationship. All right. And they don't supervise each other because they're two managers, right? And they both report up to different chains, but they're both leaders in the organization. All right. What could go wrong? What could possibly go wrong? Well, the first thing to think about, which I think is really interesting, is a recent study that I read said about 60% of people meet a partner at work. 60%, 6 out of 10 people meet someone to date at work. You know how many of those relationships last more than a year? Okay, you ready for this? 5%. So guess what? There's a lot of hooking up and there's a lot of breaking up. And the breakup is what our HR hair stands on end about, right? Because what's going to happen when they don't want to talk to each other anymore, or one of them gets a new partner and brings them to the holiday party? It can be a mess. I've been there. It can be a mess. So what are we worried about? What are we thinking about when we have this crossover between our work lives and our personal lives? First thing are equal employment opportunity issues, right? Harassment, discrimination, retaliation. So this is where the idea of a love contract came into play. Okay, I'm not kidding here. It's called a love contract. So if I'm having a relationship with my boss, a personal romantic relationship with my boss, and the company is worried that I might say down the road that I was required to participate in this relationship, or that I was somehow harassed or discriminated against, they want me to sign a document called a love contract. And the love contract says, I, Jen Shaw, agree that I'm voluntarily dating whatever his name is, John, and I'm not feeling coerced and I'm not feeling upset and everything's fine and I'm not worried. All right, well, that's great. Except the problem is, when you sign the document, everything's fine. When we break up, John is a schmuck and he's making my life miserable. That piece of paper is worthless as a defense to my claims. Okay, so the idea of having somebody sign a love contract, I mean, I get it. It's creative. It sounds kind of cute, but it is not worth the paper it's written on. Favoritism. right? So John and I decide, hey, we're going to make sure that nobody thinks I'm getting special treatment. In fact, John is harder on me because we're dating each other. That doesn't take away the perception of favoritism. There may not be actual favoritism, but people who see us making out in the parking lot at lunch, and now he's my boss, they're going to think I'm getting some benefit from this relationship, right? Some work-related benefit. Conflict of interest, right? So let's say John and I don't work together, but I own an office supply company and we're dating. And so John makes sure that the company purchases all of the office supplies from my company. Maybe I don't give the best prices. Maybe I don't have the best customer service. Maybe my deliveries are always late, but John will never fire me because he and I are having a romantic relationship. Okay, John is putting his personal interests in front of the organization's interests, all right? The company may be able to get a better deal, a better price, a better process, but John's not even going to look into that because I'm his girlfriend. So what about off-duty conduct? Let's talk about the social media post. Am I allowed to post on social media after hours? Of course. But I better make sure that I say somewhere that those views are my views and those views are not my employer's views. And what if the views I'm posting are threatening or talk about wanting to exterminate a group of people or talk about stereotypical things that I think are wrong with certain groups of people? Could that reflect on me in the work environment? You bet. And particularly when you think about my workplace footprint, am I the newest employee at the lowest level, or am I somebody sitting in the C-suite? Or do I work in the executive director's office? Or am I the president, right? Not our president, but a president. We have to think about that, all right? So when we talk about this boundary between work and personal, you really have to think about, how do we get there? How do we tell our employees? And one of the things that's really important is for you to just require transparency. We should all have policies that say, look, if you start dating somebody in the workplace, I don't care what their level is. I don't care what your level is. You got to go to HR and you got to tell them what's going on. If you're going to post on social media, if that's your gig, that's your jam, that's what you want to do, great. Post away, but you better say very clearly, these views are my own. They have nothing to do with anybody I know, anywhere I work, etc. So you want to have policies as an employer that make these issues clear, all right? And, you know, I've been hearing a lot of grumbling about employee handbooks recently. Why do we have an employee handbook? And nobody reads them anyway, and they're too expensive to update. I get it, but you're the one who has to drive the culture on this, folks. If you want people to read your employee handbooks, have a pizza party, pass out the handbook, and tell everyone they have an hour to read it, right? I mean, you have to invest in this. If you want them to read it, you got to pay them to read it. You got to make sure that they're held accountable. Give them a quiz, and everyone who gets a perfect score goes in a drawing and they win something. If you give them the handbook and they see that your handbook is sitting on the shelf and you haven't cracked it open in 5 years, we got a problem. So create the expectation with your employees that they better know what's in your policies and procedures. They better understand them, all right? You got to train leaders to understand what the expectations are and how to identify when there's an issue. You want those leaders coming to you early and in a fair way, not giving certain people more leeway than others. You also want to consider the cultural and the reputational impact of conduct, whether it's dating in the workplace, whether it's the social media, whether it's hiring relatives, you know, whatever it may be. Think about that, because it's not just about legal compliance. Obviously, legal compliance is important, but the reputational risk can often be just as costly if you're not thinking through how to effectively manage these issues. We're already in September. The holiday party, folks, is around the corner. And I've been talking to a lot of people about the fact that they don't even do holiday gatherings anymore. They've sort of decided they're too dangerous. Everybody makes a complaint. It's a problem. Okay, but then if you look at surveys, employees say, but we never see each other. Half of our team works at home. Half of my team works at home a couple days a week. And I tell them it's okay because it's fine. If that's what they want to do, great. But do I wish they were here so we could talk and I could help them and they could help me and we could, yeah, I would rather be together just because I'm old and that's my bias. But they're very effective working at home. They do a great job. If they didn't do a great job, they couldn't work at home, but they do. So a lot of this is figuring out there is going to be a blur between work and personal. How are we going to manage it? How are we going to identify it? How are we going to push through it so we're still getting done what we need to get done as an organization? And if you think of these issues from that perspective, it's going to help a lot. Now, the first thing you have to do is audit your workplace. Do you have actual or potential or perceived conflicts of interest? Do you hire relatives? Do you allow relatives to supervise each other? Do you have people who are involved in romantic relationships? I guarantee you do. Do you require them to disclose them? Do you have consequences if they don't? Do you change reporting relationships when you need to avoid a potential problem? You have to audit your workplace. You have to figure out what are you dealing with, okay? By the way, family-owned businesses are notorious, obviously, for hiring a lot of family members. And non-family members often feel threatened. They feel like, well, I'm never going to be able to be president because Paulina is going to be president. She's the owner's daughter and they're grooming her to be president. Yeah, they are. You're not going to be president. That's just how it is, folks. You work for a family business, that's how it is. Are they going to prefer the family member? You bet. Many times they will. So you have to ask questions when you're interviewing, right? If you work at a family-owned business and you're trying to make sure you get good people who can do what needs to be done, and be transparent, explain to them, look, the owner's kids work here. This is how it works, right? Make sure that people understand what's going on. And I think the more we try to hide this kind of stuff, the more problems we're going to have, because when you try to hide it, you end up in a place where it looks like you had some ill motive. It looks like you were trying to hide something, trying to avoid accountability, trying to avoid letting people know what's going on. Just come out with it. What are the policies, right? What do you expect? What are we training people on? I mean, here's the bottom line, you guys. You're never going to be able to separate people's personal lives and their professional lives entirely. You just can't, right? These little pocket devices that we have, these little phones, can do way too much, right? We're never going to be able to separate that out, but we can manage it. We can manage the overlap. We can do it in a way where we can let people know these are our expectations. These are the consequences if you don't meet the expectations. This is what we want you to be doing. When you set those expectations and then you train people to enforce those expectations, you're going to avoid a lot of problems. Now, it doesn't mean everybody's going to be happy. John and I are having a relationship. You find out and you say, okay, listen, you're both managers, but I can't have two managers dating. There's too many conflicts that could arise. One of you's got to go. Yeah, that may be a consequence. It just is what it is, right? For the love of your life, you may put up with it. One of you may go if that's what it is. But what I want you to think about, first of all, is being fair, being reasonable. If there's not a chance that these two are going to create a problem, then don't create a problem now. Take a step back. Look at the impact of that relationship on the work environment. Is there a way to mitigate some of the negative impacts? And if there isn't, then maybe you do need to make a decision to change somebody's job or their location or something of the sort. So what I want you to understand is when you think about this crossover between work and personal, just understand it's not black and white, okay? You're going to have to manage. You're going to have to get creative. You're going to have to think through the best way to deal with things. And it's not always going to be obvious. This is why everybody, all of us in HR, we need resources, right? We need people we can call to say, hey, I need a gut check. I need to understand if I should tell these people that they either have to be transferred to different areas or they have to break up. Like, let's figure that out. So it's not easy, but as I have said many times on this podcast, you guys, we can do hard things. Do your audit. Okay, go figure out what you've got going on in your organization and then fix it. All right, everyone, thank you for joining me today. It's always such an honor and privilege. If you have ideas or thoughts or guests or anything that you want to share with me about this podcast, please email me. I'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, go out and make it a great day. Workplace Wake Up, including our guests and hosts, do not provide legal advice in this podcast. Do not act upon any of the information discussed in this podcast without first consulting a licensed attorney in your jurisdiction. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Workplace Wake Up. If you found today's discussion helpful, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share the podcast with your HR and leadership teams. For more insights, training programs, and legal updates, you can visit us at shawlawgroup.com.